Okay, so the temple. We talked about, we read about the actual building of the temple. 1 Kings 7, moving on to the palace. Now we're going to go back to the temple for more stuff about the temple. It took Solomon 13, now we just got done reading the last previous sentence, he had spent 7 years building it. It took him 13 years, however, to complete the construction of his palace. This would have been after he finished building the temple. He didn't begin building the palace until after he finished building the temple, so it's 20 years total. He built the palace of the forest of Lebanon. That's an actual building. 100 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high, with 4 rows of cedar columns supporting trimmed cedar beams. It was roofed with cedar above the beams that rested on the columns, 45 beams, 15 to a row. Its windows were placed high in sets of 3 facing each other. All the doorways had rectangular frames. They were in the front part in sets of 3 facing each other. So that's one building made entirely out of wood from the trees of the forest of Lebanon. In fact, it was so identified with this wood that it became called the house of the forest of Lebanon. It is not a forest in Lebanon. It is referring to a building in Jerusalem that was made out of wood from the forest of Lebanon. He made a colonnade 50 cubits long and 30 wide. In front of it was a portico, and in front of that were pillars and an overhanging roof. He built the throne hall, the hall of justice, that sounds like a comic book term or something like that, where he was to judge, and he covered it with cedar from floor to ceiling. And the palace in which he was to live, set farther back, was similar in design. So the people would go into the hall of justice to have their cases presented before Solomon, and Solomon's actual residence was behind there. Solomon also made a palace like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had married. All these structures, from the outside to the great courtyard and from foundation to eaves, were made of blocks of high-grade stone cut to size and trimmed with a saw on their inner and outer faces. The foundations were laid with large stones of good quality, some measuring 10 cubits and some 8. Above were high-grade stones cut to size and cedar beams. The great courtyard was surrounded by a wall of 3 courses of dressed stone and 1 course of trimmed cedar beams, as was the inner courtyard of the temple of the Lord with its portico. Let's see, is the 2 Chronicles account finished? No, it doesn't even talk about the palace. Didn't think so. The chronicler is not interested in that kind of stuff. So that's the palace. Now back to more stuff about the temple. King Solomon sent to Tyre and brought Huram. Remember that guy? We read about him. We got his name in 2 Chronicles. We haven't gotten his name yet here in Kings, but whose mother was a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and whose father was a man. Now in the Chronicles it says Dan, so maybe she was mixed herself. I don't know. Whose mother was a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and whose father was a man of Tyre and a craftsman in bronze. Huram was highly skilled and experienced in all kinds of bronze work. He came to King Solomon and did all the work assigned to him. He cast 2 bronze pillars, each 18 cubits high and 12 cubits around by line. He also made 2 capitals of cast bronze to set on top of the pillars. Each capital was 5 cubits high. A network of interwoven chains festooned the capitals on top of the pillars, 7 for each capital. He made pomegranates in 2 rows, encircling each network to decorate the capitals on top of the pillars. Remember, the priest's robes, or the high priest's robe at least, had pomegranates and bells lining the hem of the robe down by his feet. So there is a connection here with that, the pomegranates hanging from chains on the top of these pillars. He did the same for each capital. The capitals on top of the pillars in the portico were in the shape of lilies. So you have more garden imagery. You have fruit, you have pomegranates, you have palm trees carved into the walls, you have cherubim, you have gourds, now you have lilies. They're the shape of these capitals. These capitals are in the shape of the lilies. The capitals on top of the pillars in the portico were in the shape of lilies, 4 cubits high. On the capitals of both pillars, above the bowl-shaped part next to the network, were the 200 pomegranates in rows all around. He erected the pillars at the portico of the temple. The pillar of the south he named Jachin, and the one of the north Boaz. The capitals on top, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. The capitals on top were in the shape of lilies, until the work of the pillars was completed. He made the sea of cast metal. The sea was a large basin of water, which is where the priests would wash their hands and feet, their ceremonial washing, before they offered the sacrifices. So this is where they cleansed themselves. This is where they did the ceremonial hands and feet washing, the priests. This is a basin of water. He made the sea of cast metal, circular in shape, measuring 10 cubits from rim to rim and 5 cubits high. It took a line of 30 cubits to measure around it. Below the rim, gourds encircled it, 10 to a cubit. The gourds were cast in 2 rows in one place with the sea. The sea stood on 12 bulls, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. So you have these bulls. On top of them are these gourds. On top of that is this sea. The sea rested on top of them, and their hindquarters were toward the center. It was a handbreadth in thickness, and its rim was like the rim of a cup, like a lily blossom. It held 2,000 baths. He also made 10 movable stands of bronze. Each was 4 cubits long, 4 wide, and 3 high. This is how the stands were made. They had side panels attached to uprights. On the panels between the uprights were lions, bulls, and cherubim. That's animals. So we've seen palm trees, pomegranates, lilies, gourds, lions, that's wild animals, bulls, that's domesticated animals, and cherubim. This is the garden. We're recreating the garden here. All this imagery and all these symbols are recreating the garden. Above and below the bulls, the lions and bulls, were wreaths of hammered work. Each stand had 4 bronze wheels with bronze axles, and each had a basin resting on 4 supports cast with wreaths on each side. On the inside of the stand there was an opening that had a circular frame 1 cubit deep. This opening was round, and with its basework it measured 1.5 cubits. Around its opening there was engraving. The panels of the stands were square, not round. The 4 wheels were under the panels, and the axles of the wheels were attached to the stand. The diameter of each wheel was 1.5 cubits. The wheels were made like chariot wheels. The axles, rims, spokes, and hubs were all of cast metal. Each stand had 4 handles, 1 on each corner, projecting from the stand. At the top of the stand there was a circular band 0.5 cubit deep. The supports and panels were attached to the top of the stand. He engraved cherubim, lions, and palm trees on the surfaces of the supports and on the panels in every available space, with wreaths all around. This is the way that he made the 10 stands. They were all cast in the same molds and were identical in size and shape. He then made 10 bronze basins, each holding 40 baths and measuring 4 cubits across, 1 basin to go on each side, on each of the 10 stands. He placed 5 of the stands on the south side of the temple and 5 on the north. He placed the sea on the south side at the southeast corner of the temple. He also made the basins and shovels and sprinkling bowls. So Hiram finished all the work he had undertaken for King Solomon in the temple of the Lord. The 2 pillars, the 2 bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, the 2 sets of networks decorating the 2 bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, the 400 pomegranates for the 2 sets of networks, 2 rows of pomegranates for each network, decorating the bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, the 10 stands with their 10 basins, the sea and the 12 bowls under it, the pots, shovels, and sprinkling bowls. All these objects that Hiram made for the temple for King Solomon in the temple of the Lord were of burnished bronze. The king had them cast in clay molds in the plain of the Jordan between Succoth and Zerathon. Solomon left all these things unweighed, because there were so many, the weight of the bronze was not determined. Solomon also made all the furnishings that were in the Lord's temple: the golden altar, the golden table on which was set the bread of the presence, the lampstands of pure gold, 5 on the right and 5 on the left in front of the inner sanctuary, the gold floral work and lamps and tongs, the pure gold basins, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, dishes, and censers, and the gold sockets for the doors of the the most holy place, and also for the doors of the main hall of the temple. When all the work King Solomon had done for the temple of the Lord was finished, he brought in the things his father David had dedicated. So David already had stuff set up for this. And Solomon didn't end up using that stuff. He brought in that stuff later, the silver and gold and the furnishings, and he placed them in the treasuries of the Lord's temple. I don't know why he did that. I don't know if Solomon felt he needed to make his own stuff. I don't know if Solomon thought that because David was a man of blood, a man of war, and he was not allowed to build the temple, he shouldn't be allowed to build any of the stuff that went in the temple. David had a lot of this stuff ready. He had a lot of this stuff already made, but the stuff that David made did not end up being used. Solomon put that away and made his own stuff. Why? I don't know. It doesn't say why. It doesn't give the motivation or the explanation for that. It just says that's what happened. 2 Chronicles now. So this is continuing straight from talking about the pillars. There's no mention of Solomon's palace here at all. The chronicler is not interested in the palace. We go straight from talking about the pillars to continuing with the rest of the stuff. He made a bronze altar 20 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 10 cubits high. He made the sea, that's again the basin where the priests wash themselves, wash their hands and feet. He made the sea of cast metal, circular in shape, measuring 10 cubits from rim to rim and 5 cubits high. It took a line of 30 cubits to measure around it. Below the rim, figures of bulls encircled it, 10 to a cubit. The bulls were cast in 2 rows in one piece of the sea. The sea stood on 12 bulls. Hang on. Okay. The sea stood on 12 bulls, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. The sea rested on top of them, and their hindquarters were toward the center. It was a handbreadth in thickness, and its rim was like the rim of a cup, like a lily blossom. It held 3,000 baths. He then made 10 basins for washing, and placed 5 on the south side and 5 on the north. In them were the things used to be put for the burnt offerings. In them the things to be used for the burnt offerings were rinsed, but the sea was to be used by the priests for washing. So those basins, so the king's text doesn't give us the explanation for what the basins were for. Here it does. The basins were for washing the instruments that were used in the sacrifices. The sea was used for washing the priests. He made 10 gold lampstands according to the specifications for them, and placed them in the temple, 5 on the south side and 5 on the north. He made 10 tables and placed them in the temple, 5 on the south side and 5 on the north. He also made 100 gold sprinkling bowls. 100 gold sprinkling bowls. He made the courtyard of the priests and a large court and the doors of the court, and they overlaid the doors with bronze. He placed the sea in the south side and the southeast corner. He also made the pots and shovels and sprinkling bowls. So Huram finished the work he had undertaken for King Solomon in the temple of God. The 2 pillars, the 2 bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, the 2 sets of network decorating the 2 bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, the 400 pomegranates for the 2 sets of network, 2 rows of pomegranates for each network, decorating the bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, the stands with their basins, the sea and the 12 bowls under it, the pots, shovels, meat forks, and all related articles. All the objects that Huram-Abi made for King Solomon at the temple of the Lord were of polished bronze. The king had them cast in clay molds in the plain of the Jordan between Succoth and Zarethan. All these things that Solomon made amounted to so much that the weight of the bronze was not determined. Solomon also made all the furnishings that were in the Lord's temple, that were in God's temple. The golden altar, the tables on which was the bread of the presence, the lampstands of pure gold with their lamps to burn in front of the inner sanctuary as prescribed, the gold floral work and lamps and tongs, they were solid gold, the pure gold wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, dishes, and censers, and the gold doors of the temple, the inner doors of the most holy place, and the doors of the main hall. That's a lot of gold. That gold is going to be very valuable. Someone is going to want to take this gold someday. It's not even going to be that long, actually. Not long after Solomon dies, we get our first invader coming to take some of this stuff. When all the work Solomon had done for the temple of the Lord was finished, he brought in the things his father David had dedicated, the silver and gold and all the furnishings, and he placed them in the treasuries of God's temple. Okay, I wanted to kind of get through the rest of Solomon's reign today, although I knew that was going to be a stretch, and that's enough. I can't do anymore. Next time we'll read about the Ark of the Covenant being brought to the temple, and the temple being dedicated and being set up and worshipped, set up and installed as a proper worship site for Israel.